If you had a billboard that you could put out in front of all of the youth of America, what would you
Mhm.
want that message to say?
After
Hey, I'm Josh Kelly with Reconciliation Church, and we're a new church on the east side of Cincinnati, Ohio. And what we're doing is we're sitting down with local leaders in the community and trying to get a sense of who they are and what they do. So today I'm sitting down with Scott Conley, who also attends Reconciliation Church, and we just want to have a quick conversation and make introduction of him to you and vice versa. So Scott, thanks for joining me today.
Oh,
How you doing?
doing good, Josh. How you doing?
Pretty good. So why
Excellent.
don't you tell us a little bit about, who you are first?
So I'm Scott Conley, and I've lived in the county now my whole life. Lived pretty much in Eastgate, and then after that, we moved to Williamsburg for about 9 years, and then in Batavia. So yeah, we've lived in Clermont County all my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So what do you do for work?
So I'm the executive director of Empower Youth.
Okay, and Empower Youth, what's that organization about?
So the whole thing is about breaking the chains of generational poverty.
Okay.
We started visiting these kids and stuff and seeing some of the situations that they're living through. One of the big things that I've noticed through these kids that we've been working with, we run a summer internship program. And with that summer internship program, last year, I believe we had only 2 students with 1 parent that is still currently alive.
Wow.
There's been years where we've had students where none of their parents are alive, and we're talking about high school age students.
Oh, wow. So a lot of broken families, broken homes.
Definitely.
Wow.
Yeah. Also, we had visited some homes, and you would have a single parent. We went to one particular house, and when we went there, they had taken this small little house and cute place from the road. You wouldn't know any different. But when we went to knock on the door, they had turned it into like a 6-unit apartment. We noticed their name wasn't on the door. So as we was walking away from the house, the caretaker came around and was asking what we were doing and was a little bit suspicious of what we were doing. And when we told him who we was looking for, he's like, well, yeah, they live in the cellar. So as we come around the back, it was literally concrete steps going down to a plywood door with a padlock on it. I think it was at that moment then, we're talking a block and a half away from the church we were going to at the time. And to have it that close and to hit home, I mean, that's the kind of stuff we would see in Haiti and stuff. So that opened our eyes to a lot. And that's when we ended up starting Empower Youth.
Okay. So you've lived in Clermont County really your whole life, and
Mhm.
now you're leading this youth empowerment organization. How did all of that transpire? Like, how did you get to where you are today?
Well, I always felt a call in the ministry, and that was the thing I would run the furthest from. I think, especially in the time that I grew up in, that ministry was not cool.
Mm.
You wouldn't have friends. You couldn't have fun. I mean, that's all the stuff that's playing in your head. And, you know, God does a funny thing to where when he has something for you to do and when he has a calling on you, he will keep putting that back in front of you.
Mm.
And that is what happened.
Yeah.
The further I ran, the more that kind of kept coming around. And then it was right in front of me and you had to step into it.
Now, was it always a specific call into helping the youth, or what was I guess the start of that call? What was the sense of that urgency to ministry?
I think it was just the fact of the peace and the hope that I wanted to share. So
Okay.
I don't think it was necessarily like a preacher or a youth minister. No, I feel like it was more than that. It was just the calling overall.
Okay. So wanting to essentially somehow, using your faith, make an
Right.
impact on the lives of other people, or
Exactly.
okay.
That's exactly it.
And so over a period of time, that transitioned into running the organization that you run today, where you're able to make an impact on people's lives. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that came to be?
Yeah. So we, again, after seeing that family and stuff living in a cellar and that, We was trying to figure out how you bring people together, because the truth of it is not as many people are going to church these days. And that was the melting pot. That was where the poor and the middle class and the wealthy would come together.
Mm.
And so we decided to start doing something called Picnics in the Park. We do it in Burke Park in Bethel. And there is where it's neutral territory. There's no agenda or anything pushed, just people coming together. And through doing those meals and stuff, and connecting that community, one of the things that had happened is the schools were going through budget cuts. And through those budget cuts, one of the people who was helping feed kids on the weekends had got their hours cut and got moved from the school. So they seen what we were doing in the community, and they said, hey, would you come out and help do our students and stuff for the weekend food packs? So we did. And we had about 14 or 15 students then. Again, that was back in 2015. And last year we ended up helping 1,100 kids every weekend with weekend food packs.
Wow. Okay, so weekend food packs, what does that consist of exactly?
So basically, it's enough protein to get them through for the weekend.
Okay. So you're providing those on a weekly basis to, did you say 1,100?
1,100 kids is what we ended up with last year. This year, I expect that to at least grow to at least 1,200.
Okay. And all of that's really born out of this drive that you have for a sense of helping your community.
Yes.
What would you say really, in terms of the community impact, what do you think really fuels that for you?
I guess seeing how much brokenness is out there.
Okay.
There's a lot of people who's lost hope and has lost joy. Obviously, we know suicide is on the rise. People would have thought that social media would have drew people together, but really it's isolated even more.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That really, I don't think anybody saw that coming, but that really did drive people to more of like a insulated lifestyle where they don't seem to want to open up and have relationships the same way that they used to. Have you noticed that?
Exactly the same thing. And that was the cool thing about Picnics in the Park. It is so cool seeing the whole community coming together, and you don't really see anybody on their phone. It is just cool. I think people are always looking for that sense of family, and you have that sense of community. And I think having that and having that experience, you start noticing that people, they're not really on their phones.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's interesting because you were talking about with technology, it changing how people think and how they interact, but you've lived here your whole life. Probably over a period of, 30 or 40 years, you've now gotten to the point where you're helping out by leading this organization. In that time frame, what are the key things that you've seen that have really changed over the course of your life in terms of how people interact and engage and what the needs are even in the area?
I think one of the biggest things that I noticed is that students nowadays, they don't even have a dream. And you have to instill and implant and encourage a dream to them, and to get them to even start thinking about their future.
Yeah.
We do something called Dream Big, and that's where we go and we speak to kindergarten classes in all the schools that we serve. And in that, we start talking about dreaming big and what they can do and what they would like to see change, and get them to start thinking about that. And, before COVID, one of the things that was really troubling, a lot of people will see it as being kind of funny, but when you really start looking at it, it is pretty serious, is we'd ask these kids what they'd want to be. And I would say probably 75% of the kids that we asked what they wanted to be when they grew up was something that wasn't real.
How do you mean?
They wanted to be fairies, or they wanted to be a monkey, or they wanted to be a unicorn. And it's like, it's very shocking because, when I was a kid, everybody wanted to be Batman or Robin, but the reality was we knew that there was reality and non-reality. And the reality is, I wanted to be a pilot for an airlines, and one of my friends wanted to work for the police, and the other one wanted to be in the Army. And, they actually had goals and dreams. And these kids, they haven't even thought about what their future looks like or what they want to be. So to see that get to that point, I do have to say some of the things that has been changing with the state of Ohio on education, though, I have seen an improvement. They are starting to connect all of their classwork into careers and jobs.
Oh, okay.
And I was really encouraged this year. This is the first time. And this year, we actually had 3 kids in one kindergarten class that want to be an engineer. So the hope for the future about dreams and being things, it was very encouraging this year.
So dream big. If you had to kind of encapsulate that in just
Mhm.
a few words, what it is and what you're doing, how would you describe that?
It's all about tying these kids in to have a brighter future.
Okay.
I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Again, we feel like a good night's rest and a dream, there's a future at the end of that.
Mm.
And without a good night's rest, a lot of these kids are sleeping on the floor. You'll have a single mom and you got 5 kids piled in one bed, or they're sleeping on the couch or on the floor. So the teachers always tell them to go home and get a good night's rest. They don't even have a pillow. And the thing is with some of the poverty and stuff that we deal with, these families are moving in the middle of the night and you can only take what you're grabbing to leave.
Yeah.
And these kids, we also send kids to camp. And the thing that's cool is 4 and 5 years later, seeing those Dream Big pillows coming with them to camp.
Mm.
It's a tie-dye pillowcase. They got a brand new pillow, and we give a book about dreaming big.
Yeah. Now I knew about the camp. I want to get to that in just a minute,
Mhm.
but I'm curious. We've talked about kind of how things have changed, how people have changed,
Mhm.
and what some of the issues are that you're seeing in the community.
Mhm.
But then also talking about where the needs are for people to have some sort of desire or some kind of vision for the future and what they want out of life and how they're going to go about that. What do you think the breakdown is there? Like, how did we get to a point where kids today, in our
Mhm.
local context, are struggling with that? I mean, what are the issues that you think are leading to that?
Well, I think a few things. One, just society as a whole. The job situation, we've seen a huge breakdown. So, back in, say, the 1990s, when all the manufacturing and construction and that was all going down, we noticed that people outside that 275 belt, all the blue collar workers had lost their jobs. They started turning to things like drugs and other issues and stuff. And
Hmm.
really, the destruction of the family started happening.
So
Uh,
that kind of disintegration of the family, breaking that down, has
yes,
led to a lot of the problems that you're encountering today.
100%.
Wow. So your organization, with the mindset of trying to help these kids and these families,
Mhm.
you've got the packs where you're giving out food and trying to meet those tangible needs, but you're
Mhm.
also going to that next level and saying, we want to help you shape a future, and we want to come alongside you and kind of help you dream about what your future could look like, maybe even set you up with a few resources and how to get there. It
Right.
sounds like, at least from what I know of the organization,
Mhm.
this sending them off to camp has a big part in shaping that. Can you tell us a little
Mhm.
bit about the camp and how that works?
So a big part for the camp as well is, they're growing up in this house that's a lot of times dysfunctional. And a lot of these kids, again, single parents and that, the kids have to become kind of the parent role and raising the other
So kind of
kids.
stepping up, taking responsibility for things that kids generally
Right.
don't need to take responsibility for.
So
Kind of
they have,
growing up too fast, as people say.
yeah, they have all that pressure on them. So the big part is again, getting these kids to camps where people love them. They're very safe and protected and they get to be a kid. They're out on the boats, they're climbing the rock wall, they're, going through tours through the woods and stuff. And then that whole commune of, bunk houses
Mm.
and the whole big cafeteria kind of thing at a camp thing. And just they get to be kids and they get to have fun and kind of get out of that world just for a minute.
Yeah. Which kind of, I think, ties into the whole dream big thing, right? Because when you're freed up from those pressures and responsibilities of being kind of in a unusual home life, and you actually get to be a kid for a minute, it almost, I would imagine, frees you up to feel like a kid for maybe the first time in a while, and
Right.
actually start thinking the way kids think, using your imagination, trying to figure out who you are and where you fit and where you belong in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We really want to, first of all, build that relationship with the family. So, one of the things we do with those weekend food packs is just that consistency and always making sure everything in there is good. There's nothing expired, nothing dented, and having that consistency, building that trust. And then from there, being able to send them to camp. And then in high school, we also work with other organizations like Jobs and Family Service. And I'm hoping soon to be working with the juvenile detention center in Clermont County. And with those interns during the summertime, they give back to community, helping us with those picnics in the park. They also have chores and stuff they will do on the farm. And then we do college visits, and then we have entrepreneurs from the community coming in. And we even have somebody from the military. One year we had a guy, he served in all 4 branches and was currently in special ops. And he's telling them what the military had done for him. And he would tell them what a recruiter can promise you and what they can't. So that way, at the end of the summer, one, they might want to go to a vocational school, learning some of these trades and stuff that we have. 2, they might want to go to college. They might want to go into the military, or if they want to go into the workforce, now we have equipped them to be able to make a good decision.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going to say, as you were kind of rattling off those things, I'm like, that is a lot of things, a lot of aspects to your organization and different avenues, I guess, if you will, to trying to help these kids and allowing them to feel empowered to make a decision for themselves about what they want out of life. That's awesome.
Yeah, we really try to target that kindergarten to high school age.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of great work. How do you coordinate that? How do you get all of these things done?
I'll tell you what, it takes a lot of volunteers. So one year we had over 1,600 people come out to help us with the weekend food packs, the Dream Big, the picnics in the park, the summer internship program. And also a great partnership with the businesses and stuff in the community, our local churches, and like I say, tons of volunteers and the schools.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you mentioned something about the interns. Can you explain that whole program?
Yeah, the summer internship program is an awesome program offered by Jobs and Family Services. Through that, the students would get paid to work for organizations and businesses and stuff in the community for the summer. And like I said, for that program, we try to cover all the bases for them for when they get older to be able to make some really good decisions, whether they're going to college or whether they're going into the workforce or whether they want to go into the military.
So they're learning skills while being paid as a part of your program.
And becoming part of a family. You know, the summer internship leader, even during the school year, she will contact the students and they'll go on little trips to, Kings Island at like the Winter Fest kind of stuff or the Cincinnati Zoo and stuff like that. So just kind of keeping the whole family together.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool.
Yeah.
So with an organization such as yours, I'm sure that, you get asked 1,000 times about who you are and what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any misconceptions about the work that you do that you would want to clean up or clear up?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is when people are living in certain communities and stuff that they think people are lazy. In fact, I know a lot of single parents who's hitting the 50, 60, and 70 hours a week to take care of their kids and stuff. Again, a lot of poor choices is made in there. A lot of families that I know, either the moms or the dads are in jail, or because of other situations and stuff, they've already passed. And here they're raising these kids on their own.
Yeah.
And then you start having the situation of like, what do you do? So they're going to work. Well, who's raising the kids?
Yeah.
And then that's where some of the breakdown starts happening as well.
Gotcha. It's interesting though, because I think, we're a church, Reconciliation Church, and churches like to help people, but we also tend to have a fear of enabling people. So if you could step back and look at churches in the area and make recommendations to them about how they could get involved, what encouragement would you give to them?
I think the big thing is not making it about things, but making it about a relationship. When we start getting around Christmas time, hate to say it, but businesses and churches, they like to feel really good about themselves and they will blow out Christmas for kids. And we always tell them, don't spend more on those kids than you would your own because you're setting those kids up for failure. One of the biggest problems that I had with that is we had a student that we was working with all summer about earning your own way. And he worked hard all year. His mom was one of those moms that was working 60, 70 hours a week and talking to him about the importance of working and earning your way. So the families on both sides of them said, you know what, you're crazy. Why are you working It's going to happen. We're just going to get stuff and that. And when Christmas rolled around, here's this kid who hasn't seen his mom most of the year because she's working. And he's seeing a church van back up the one door and a business backing up to the other door. And they're unloading these $1,000 Christmases for these kids. And here that mom that's been working her butt off all year long is going to the dollar store and going to these stores where they're on clearance and buying her kids a very meager Christmas. And he's looking at both sides of them thinking, why am I doing what I'm doing?
Yeah.
So I think the big thing is just educating the church. If you got a food pantry, don't just tap on the trunk and drop groceries in the trunk. Make it about a relationship. If you're going to be doing food packs, talk to these families, start building those relationships. Everything that we do at Empire Youth is about building a relationship, because if it's not building a relationship, we cut the program out right then.
Gotcha. Yeah, that relational aspect makes a lot of sense. I'm curious though, I've read books on, when helping hurts, right? And so things like that keep popping into my mind if I'm looking at a situation trying to help somebody, because it sounds like with this example that you gave, there's the possibility to maybe strip dignity from somebody who's trying and putting forth effort to provide and create a life and teach their kids certain values. Do you run into situations like that a lot where it's almost undermining the guardian or parent's sort of influence to help raise the kid or influence the kid or help set them up for their future?
Yeah, like I say, we see that a lot, and it's really good-hearted, good-intending groups wanting to help, but not knowing how to help.
Yeah. So you're saying based on your experience that kind of taking the attitude of it being more of a relationship building thing as the primary
Yes.
endeavor, and then building from that to meet maybe tangible needs, but also to think long term, right? Your program's called, Dream Big, and you're trying to cast a future for, or help them to cast a future for themselves, which is more of a long term approach to solving certain problems, not necessarily that immediate, and getting into more of that instant gratification of, oh, I helped and put a smile on a kid's face today, but not necessarily thinking about the long term implications, if you will.
Stuff never brings joy. So one of the things, again, for Christmas, we used to do all the gifts and stuff and kind of get into that mindset. And we noticed, first of all, the people who were buying the stuff and spending the money, they weren't happy. They weren't happy for the teams that were coming out to deliver, because you'd have somebody saying, yeah, put it in the corner with the rest of the stuff. So you figure you did everything for nothing. Then the next day you see it on the Clermont County yard sale site. So it wasn't working out good for anybody. The kids weren't getting it. Everybody was disgruntled. So we ended that program, and our Winter Wonderland, that was the next thing that we brought out. It was about bringing families together. It's from the kid who gets the thing to come, the invite to come to it, and it's good for their entire family. Now the kids get one toy. They have all these different craft tables where they're making Christmas ornaments and all kinds of stuff and games, win little trinkety prizes. We have a Mr. and Mrs. Claus there, a beautiful setup, Winter Wonderland crazy. It's beautiful. And you're having these families getting family photos and spending time together. And the most amazing thing is at the end of that, the very first year we did it, we're having cars leaving and we do a winter box, a Christmas box, and it had cookie dough and a gallon of milk and some hamburger, sausage, eggs, all this stuff. And anyway, when the family came through, the grandmother was sitting at the passenger door, and I asked her, I was like, hey, I said, this is our first year doing this. What did you think? Could you give us any feedback, good or bad? We'd like to know. We'd like to do better. And she breaks down and just starts crying and saying, you know what? Just the fact that you allowed me to have an experience with my grandkids and with my daughter, I just want to thank you.
Wow.
And like I said, the kids were happy and they got one gift.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said that things don't bring about joy. So I want to touch on that a little bit more, not necessarily for Empower Youth, your organization, but more so for you personally. Where do you think that joy really comes from?
Well, first of all, it comes from faith. Your joy comes from faith. Knowing who you are, knowing that you're valued, and what your future is.
Yeah. So when you talk about having value, because I don't think that, especially kids, they don't really think in those terms,
Right.
right? So
Right.
demonstrating value can go a long way, not
Mhm.
just saying that they have value, but actually demonstrating it. But I mean, that sounds like what you guys are doing with Empower Youth.
Exactly. You know, and I say this for everybody to just everybody feels like they don't have time. They don't have the resources. They don't have the skills.
Mm,
Anybody has the skills to be a friend.
mm,
I think one of the greatest things that I've seen is you feel like you're going to go out there and you're going to do all these things for everybody. And it's I'm going to do. And you start doing all these things. Like one of the kids had lost his mother, lost his grandmother. He was locked up. He got out because everybody in his family was dying off. And the judge ended up letting him go with his brothers and sisters to this foster family. So I'm there befriending this young man and trying to encourage him, trying to give him hope. And he definitely appreciated it. But what I didn't realize is 2 years later, when I lost my wife, he called me up
oh, wow.
and he's spending time with me.
Wow.
And like I say, you never realize what you're doing, what will come back.
Yeah.
You know, there's something in the Bible about reap and sow.
Mm,
It's true.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's funny how those little things that you think, didn't make a difference or wouldn't really, ever manifest into something more meaningful, and then sure enough,
Mm,
they come back and they do. They can really touch your heart in powerful
yes.
ways. Yeah, that's cool. You said that a small action can make a huge difference,
Right.
right? And I'm trying to instill that in my kids, that it's the little things that add up over time that lead to your ability to accomplish your goals in life. And I'm curious,
Mhm.
you started this organization in 2015. It's now 2023, and
Mm.
you don't only have, the food packs, but you also have the Dream Big, and you're sending kids to camp, and you have all these different ways and
Mhm.
avenues to try to help people. What are, if you had to categorize, like, in a few steps along the journey
Mm.
over the last 8 years, what are the big things, and how have you seen your organization continue to evolve to meet those needs?
So truly the big part of it was again Lori being the children's minister in town. And here she had a small group of kids that she seen that she wanted to help.
Mm.
And through that, trying to reach more kids, then we stepped into doing the picnics in the park.
And you started with the food packs then?
No, the picnics in the park.
The picnics in the park was the first thing that you did.
Yes.
Okay.
Because again, we started noticing how do you get everybody together? We
Okay.
seen that at church. And it's like, what is going on here? How do we bring people together? So then we moved to a neutral territory to bring people together. So all of a sudden, people in the community started noticing people coming together and who's running this and who's doing it. And through that, really, even with like the bank support and prominent people in the community getting behind it, all of a sudden the schools took recognize of it.
Okay.
And then that's when they're like, whoa, they must be okay. Now, could you run our weekend food program? And then through that program, then that's when Jobs and Family Services had noticed us.
Wow.
And then that's when other schools started saying, we really love what you're doing there. How can you help us? And again, all that stuff doesn't happen overnight. You know, if a school wants to come on board with us, sometimes it takes a year because you just can't take in a school. Now, all of a sudden, you got to start talking to the businesses and the churches and stuff in that community of, hey, can you partner with us to help this school?
Mm.
You know, we're spending anywhere from $16,000 to $35,000 a school year just on weekend food packs,
Yeah.
just for that program.
Wow.
So it just takes a lot of support from the community. But the thing is no matter what you do in life, if you have a dream, nobody's going to work harder than you for that dream.
Mm.
So if you are working hard, people are going to meet you at that level that you're at.
Mm.
So if you're not fighting for that dream, chances are nobody's going to be fighting any more for it than you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting, though, that all of that started from just something as simple as a community based initiative just bringing people together in a park to have a sense of community and to build those relationships. I think a lot of
Yes.
churches and other organizations would look at that. And I know personally, I would probably, look at it from the context of, so we're really just going to get everybody together in a park and hang out. And I would feel like that's not going to really lead to much. But now here you
Right.
are 8 years later, leading this huge organization that's making
Mhm.
such a difference in the community. What
Mhm.
what encouragement would you give to other organizations to start from a humble beginning?
I think one of the most important things is being a good neighbor.
Mm,
That's one of the things I learned early on when I bought the first house I purchased to live in is my neighbors showed me what it was to be a good neighbor. So therefore, wherever I went, I was a good neighbor. When you have all these people that's has the same mindset as you, who's running different organizations and nonprofits and churches around you, and you get out there and you can play well with others, then all of a sudden there's that community, that tightness to help you succeed as well.
yeah.
So we are all succeeding together. I think that's probably the greatest advice I can give is to be open and to be a willing player and to be willing to help others and others will be willing to help you.
Yeah. So it's true then that it kind of rubs off, right? Like as you're
Mhm.
learning and applying to your own life, that fuels other people to want to go and do the same thing. And that there actually is, if we all put forth that effort, we are going to make an impact, even if we don't see it immediately over a
Yeah.
period of time. The things that we do, they actually do add up and make a big difference. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So a lot of people look at, you know, some sort of initiative like Empower Youth or
Mhm.
any kind of charity or outreach program, and they often think you kind of have both ends of the spectrum. A lot of people will think, well, if you can just throw enough money at it, the problem will go away. Other people might think, if I just tell these people to work harder and provide for themselves,
Mhm.
kind of pick themselves up by their own bootstraps, the problem will go away. I feel like the answer is somewhere in the middle. Can you kind of
Yeah.
tease out where you think that line is and what people can do to both help and enable others to help themselves?
So I think the big thing for us is, to be honest, it was too big of an issue for us to tackle with adults. And that's why we're focusing with the kids.
Mm,
You start talking to these kids again about what they want to do or what they think they're going to do after school when they're getting ready to graduate. And it's funny that so many of them will come back to, well, mom works at McDonald's or, dad works at AutoZone and they're just going to work in town where they're at and not realizing that the world's a lot bigger than that town. So to have other people to come alongside of them and to open up their mind and their dreams bigger
mm,
than that town, that's probably the biggest thing is just again partnering alongside of these kids for us, again gaining the trust of the families to allow us to work with those kids and to just cast a bigger vision. Again, my opinion from me and my life is my grandparents were such an influence for me, and here they owned rental property, they owned businesses, they built houses, they did so much, so it would always inspire me to be like my grandparents. These kids don't have their grandparents, and like I say, some of them don't even have their parents,
mm.
so they need people like us out in the community who want to see people do better and want to make our community better, partnering along these kids so they can see that there's a whole nother world out there other than that little town or that little Section 8 subdivision or community they're in or apartment complex, and let them know there's more out there than that.
Yeah, it kind of enables them to think beyond just their current circumstance,
That's right.
right? And so you help by building the relationship and empowering them to start dreaming bigger than just
That's it.
their current context.
That is it.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. So we've established that it's not just laziness and it's not just, throw more resources at it. Um,
Mhm.
you know, I feel like that's starting to shift the way that I see the ability to outreach and how to go about it, relationship building. How have you seen your mindset shift or your approach or your attitude shift over time as this organization has continued to evolve.
Yeah. So that's a big one. So, you know, when you come off in a certain class, you don't even realize it, whether you're wealthy or middle class or poverty. And even in like a middle class mindset, you start recognizing certain things about yourself and you're not real happy about it. Like, you know, the first time you start building these relationships and you have somebody that's in poverty and they hand you this dirty baby and you're like, ooh. And they want you to hold their baby because you're like family. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, one day, you're at the park or wherever, and they hand you this baby, and this baby is not a dirty baby anymore. That baby has a name.
Oh.
And that changes you.
Yeah.
You know, you start driving through a Section 8 community or a trailer park, and you're at that place. Now, when you're driving through it, people know who you are, and they're waving and talking with you and stopping you. And now it's part of your home.
Yeah.
That's been the huge mind shift that I've seen. And to get to that point is where it's at.
Yeah. And I feel like everybody has those moments in life. It's like almost peeling the onion of yourself. You know, it's a new layer. You didn't realize that it was there.
Yes.
And it has just such a profound impact. So I can definitely relate to that. I've had several of those moments in my life as well. Yeah. So that's where your mindset is and how it's kind of transitioned over 8 years. How have you seen the mindset shift of the people that you're trying to help?
So again, when you're starting to partner up and build these relationships, you start seeing these huge differences in what is keeping them in poverty. You know, the thing you got to realize is in a poor community, these kids and their friends have families that's all in the same situations. There's no way really out, you know, unless somebody is reaching in. And, you know, one of the things that one of the students had told me before is he was earning money through the program. And he was making really good money through the program working with us and stuff. And he already had it in his mind that his sister was turning 16 years old and he was going to give her half of his money. And mom needed money for groceries. He's going to give her the other half. And I'm like, listen, I said, you know, first of all, you're working and you're earning this money. If you want to give them a percentage of that, that is fine. But you have to keep back a percentage. I said, because in 2 years, you're going to be 16 years old. And if you have enough money saved up to where you can buy a car, now you can get a better job to help your family even more. Poverty mindset's not that. Poverty mindset is if you have it, somebody needs it, you give it, and you give it all. I had a gentleman who was in the military. He was in his 50s. And he came to me and he goes, Scott, I want to give you $25 a week because in 5 weeks, I want to buy a Kings Island pass. This is a man who's in his 50s who was in the military, who was holding a job, but had that poverty mindset. I'm like, dude, you make good money. Why do you need me to hold your money for you so you can get a Kings Island pass? He said, well, because if my neighbor asks for the money, which I think they're going to, they don't have enough money to pay their rent. And when they ask me, I'm going to give it to them. Even though his rent could be due the next week and he would have nothing. And then he would try to figure out how he's going to pay his rent. So seeing that from a kid to a grown man, it's the same mindset.
So the poverty mindset even is a giving mindset because they see other people in a similar circumstance.
Yes.
And they want to help them out. And then they're lacking maybe some of the stewardship skills that they otherwise could, you know, use to better their own situation. That's fascinating. I never really thought about it like that. Are there any other mindset shifts that you've experienced over the years? Like specific examples of kids or even things that, you know, you want to tell people or, you know, educate us. What are these mindsets? How do we get out of those?
Well, I think one of the things you have to protect yourself with as well is you're going to be helping people and you're going to be putting yourself out. And you're going to build these bonds and trust and relationships with people. And you can't help everybody. So here you put all this time and energy and you get to the point where you are calling them son and you are calling them daughter. And they hit a certain age and they can make their own choices and they split and they go back. There's something really heavy that holds them back and connects them to that family that might not be good for them,
Mm.
whether it would be situations with drugs, um, all kinds of other things that is not a positive thing for their life. And you see them get drawn back to it. That's a
Mm.
huge force to break.
Yeah.
And it hurts your feelings because you see the potential in them and then they walk away from it.
Yeah. So it's going to cost you a lot emotionally even to invest in people that way.
Yes.
Yeah. That's tough. Are there any, specific circumstances? We don't have to get into, names and places and things like that, but
Mhm.
are there any really emotional stories of examples like that that you would want to share?
Yeah, there was a boy who had it really rough, and he had some great people around him. And when he was getting all the way to the end, he had turned 18 before he was able to graduate. And the family had him lined up for a 6 month, training class. And he was going to be making great money,
Mm.
better money than I've ever made. But yet he was drawn to go back to his family,
Mm.
and the family that wasn't healthy for him.
Wow.
And that broke my heart for him,
Yeah.
because he had an amazing future ahead of him. He had a setback and he's coming back around, but there's going to be a little more struggle, a little more effort to get where he needs to be.
Yeah. That's tough to see somebody
Yeah.
that you cared so much about to
Mhm.
cause themselves so much
Yes.
harm. That's sad. And so that has to weigh pretty heavy on your heart to see somebody that you spent so much time
Mm.
pouring into and building a relationship with to then turn around and fall right back into the same circumstances. That's got to be really emotionally draining. But it reminds me, at Reconciliation Church, we are a gospel centered church. And so everything's about Jesus. And looking at that story, I can see so much of the gospel in it, right? Because I am that lost boy. I am that child that God has pursued, and I've just completely walked away from Him. And so I feel like there's
Mm.
just so much experience between what you're doing at
Mm.
your organization and what we're trying to pursue with Reconciliation Church. There's just
Yeah.
so much crossover and so many similarities to the context and the circumstances, and the stories even just of people trying to pour out their life for something meaningful, to then have that, to sometimes feel like it's coming back almost empty handed. That's got to be really
Right.
tough. Yeah, and it's funny how those individual little stories really point to the bigger story of, life and our existence and the reason that we're here and what purpose that we serve. And as a church, we believe that we're here to bring glory to God. And if we're honest, as broken people, we do not bring glory to God, and we need Christ to then
Mm.
step in and to right that relationship again. So it's crazy how much of a connection there is, even in the very, everyday activities of our jobs or the organizations that we run or participate in, to see threads of that reality really coming to life.
Mm.
So a lot of this has been pretty heavy stuff. But
Mm.
I'm curious because you mentioned joy previously. How do you find
Yeah.
joy in these circumstances and the work that you're doing there?
Mm.
Because a lot of it is pretty heavy stuff. You're dealing with a lot of broken homes, a lot of broken
Mm.
relationships, and a lot of difficult circumstances. How do you find joy, and what lighthearted kind of moments have you experienced in the work that you do?
Yeah. So, I think the fact of just seeing kids having something positive to look back to on their childhood, like the picnics in the park. I get teachers telling me about how the kids are looking so forward to the end of the school year, but the thing that they're talking about is the picnic in the park. And
Mm.
for some of these kids, that is their summer vacation. That is their summer break where we have bands playing and food is free for the community, where everybody's coming together. We do their national night out and have bounce houses and the police and the fire and have a symphony coming out. We have all this stuff. And just how the kids so many times would look back and not have that positive spot in their life.
Mm.
That gives me joy,
Yeah.
you know. I'd say one of the things that I thought was kind of funny is on our Dream Big, a lot of these kindergartners, they'll draw pictures and thank you cards and stuff for their pillows and that. So we have all of these Dream Big clouds there at the ranch, and it has all their dreams and stuff on it. And then some of the kids, like I say, have all of these things that they colored and that and sent to us afterwards. And I think one that I appreciated the most is one little girl kind of in broken, writing that she loved Mr. Scott. And it was a picture of her and a picture of me, and it had a heart. And what I knew was really true love is the fact she gave me a full head of hair. And I thought, how awesome is that? So I just look at that
That's
picture.
generous.
It is generous. So I just look at that, and I've kept that now for a couple of years, and I just like to look back on it and say, you know what, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's funny.
So yeah,
It's awesome. Well, Scott, it's clear that you're passionate about the work that you do, and your organization is a wonderful organization, making a huge impact to the community. So, very much appreciate the work that you do.
Thank
And all
you.
the effort that goes into it.
Thank you.
But man, you got a lot of irons in the fire. How do you not burn out?
To be honest, a lot of people will come to me and say, Scott, what do you need? Do you need money? Do you need, and we've already kind of talked about that. It ain't about all the time the financial need. But my answer is always the same, is give me leaders. And one thing that keeps me from getting burned out is I have great leaders. I have Amy Smith, who runs our summer internship program for us. She also runs our Dream Big program, has had amazing ideas, has written a book. So we used to give the kids the tie-dye pillowcase, the pillow, and a stuffed animal. But, really to start feeding into these kids a little bit more and trying to improve their life, a lot of it will go back into reading and stuff. And here she wrote a book. So every kindergartner gets a book.
What's the book called?
Dream Big with Lori.
Dream Big with Lori.
And again, Lori, it was her vision, her dream to get this off the ground.
Yeah.
And then I have Amber Hansel, who runs all of the organization for the picnics in the park, scheduling all the different churches and businesses to supply the food, what they're going to cook, what they're going to make, the finances on it, all the entertainment, and then the whole organization with the community for their national night out, because they even moved their night back a night just to hit on our day so we could do that picnic for them. And she also does our Winter Wonderland event. And like I say, that event is about 3 hours long, and we'll run through 800 or 900 people in 3 hours. And we're doing breakfast with Santa. We're doing gifts. We're doing family photos. We're doing the collections for the winter boxes, the Christmas boxes for the
I've
pantry
seen it.
items.
It's a madhouse. You guys have a lot of stuff going on.
Man. And she is so great with organization and stuff, and she puts that together. So I just have great leaders.
Yeah.
Great support.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I always talk to your son and I tell him, keep me away from your dad because he rubs off on you. You have that effect. You bring people around you and they see the passion that you have for the work that you do, and it makes them want to get involved. So I always tell them, keep your dad kind of at arm's length from me because he'll just keep pulling me in, giving me more stuff to do. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're a great guy, man.
Thanks.
So Empower Youth, great organization, making a local impact. If you had a billboard that you could put out in front of all of the youth of America, what would you want that message to say?
After all the conversations we had with the students, the one thing that keeps kind of coming back up is they don't think they matter. And the thing is like I talked about, when you start working with these kids and you see the value, maybe you are valued.
You are valued, just plastered on the billboard.
Maybe you are valued.
You are valued.
Because they feel like they don't have self-worth. That would probably be it.
Yeah. Well, feeling like you don't have self-worth is certainly going to make an impact on how you navigate life. So,
Mm.
yeah. So what about for churches and other organizations that want to get involved and want to help out? They see a need. How do we meet it? What would be your encouragement or advice to them?
I think probably the biggest thing I would advise churches would be is to do things with purpose,
Mm,
to think it out, to not just be doing things to be doing things,
yeah.
not to be doing things to be seen, but do things that matter.
Yeah.
Do things with purpose. One of the things that I would always hear at like a catalyst event and stuff is recognize what is the win. When you do something, ask yourself, what is the win?
Yeah.
Is it to feed them for the day? Is it to impact their life for a better tomorrow? What for them to come to your church? For them to get saved or get baptized? For them to start tithing? Honestly, boil it down, what is the win?
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And at Reconciliation Church, we have kind of a similar mindset. We want the gospel to be central to everything that we do, from the messages that we preach to the songs that we sing, our forms of outreach, how we welcome people into our gathering space.
Mm.
Everything needs to be really centered around the gospel. And I think to your point, having that, that intentionality behind everything you do, there's a
Yes.
reason that big organizations have mission, vision, values, right? We can learn from that.
Mm.
It gives you purpose and meaning and intentionality to what you do, because ultimately we all have a goal, right? We're not just doing this to spin our wheels. We have goals. We have things that we want to accomplish. And I'm sure for Empower Youth, it's helping out,
Mm.
the kids who are in poverty. And for Reconciliation Church, it's preaching the gospel in everything that we do. So I like that.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you for giving me a chance to catch up with you and for telling everybody about Empower Youth and what you have going on. I really appreciate you taking
All
the
right,
time
man.
to meet with me.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Take care.
All right. Introduce me like that.
I'm Josh with Reconciliation Church. I want to introduce you to the smartest human being that lives in Clermont County. How's it going, Scott?